It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Fastline Marketing Group. Fastline has been serving farmers and the ag industry for over 40 years and is in the name you can trust. Check out fastline.com for your latest equipment needs and fastlinemarketinggroup.com for their full suite of print and digital marketing capabilities. Fastline Marketing Group, the farmer resource and the marketing partner of choice for the agricultural community. Fastline.com. Welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is part of a revolutionary company who's transforming the global produce industry. Their technology provides growers and buyers access to a constant supply of high-quality produce across the U.S., Mexico, and Latin America. From Oakland, California, I'd like to welcome Keely Wachs, Senior VP of Marketing at ProducePay. Welcome, Keely, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Chrissy, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me and our team. We're really honored to be a part of this.
Awesome. So first of all, can you tell me a bit about your background?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. I have had the great fortune of working for some amazing companies, really trying to address climate change and other large-scale systematic environmental issues. I actually started in the renewable energy space and spent a decade there, and then made the pivot to food about 10 years ago. And I've worked for some amazing companies, including Cliff Bar, as well as other tech and ag tech companies that are helping to address this issue. And just recently was fortunately able to join ProducePay last year. And we're building an amazing team and we're doing great things.
Oh, that's awesome. So tell me about ProducePay and its mission.
So ProducePay is a technology company that is looking to create a more connected and sustainable produce sector. Okay, so every company has their tag mission statement, but what we're really doing is focusing on helping growers, and we think growers are the center of creating a more healthy, a more just and sustainable food system. And historically, farmers haven't obviously had many advantages. And our founder Pablo, who's a 4th generation grower from Mexico, he identified all these issues. And so we started systematically, one by one, trying to address many of those issues. And looking forward to talking about those with you today here.
Wow, that's great. And as you mentioned, your founder, Pablo Borquez, is very passionate about solving problems in the food supply chain and a very inspirational person. Can you tell me a bit about his journey?
Sure. I mean, Pablo, like I said, Pablo's a 4th generation farmer from Mexico. His family farms in the Sonoran Desert, and they produce grapes and asparagus. And Pablo grew up on the farm, he and his siblings, and he saw how hard his dad worked and how hard his grandfather worked. And he recognized pretty early that, farmers were really disadvantaged in many ways, right? And the thing that he recognized, I think, pretty early on, and he set his life in motion to try to address, which was this idea around transparency in the food system. So his family would spend, millions of dollars every year and many months out of the year planting and harvesting and making sure that this bountiful, beautiful crop came to life. And then they would ship it, right? And they wouldn't ever see kind of like what happened to that food, right? And it's kind of like, the way he always says it was like, imagine like you grow something like a child, and then it just kind of goes away and you never see it again. It's kind of a weird feeling, and it happens every year. So we recognized that there was like this weird, opaque and fragmented nature of food in general, but in produce in more particular. And what happens is, it gets shipped to a shipper, and then that crosses the border. If you're importing into the U.S., it comes into the border, and then that gets distributed to 4 or 5 other different groups, and then eventually gets to the retailer or food service, or wherever the end final seller is, and then ultimately to the consumer, right? And so, in addition to obviously there being kind of challenges with that model for the grower, who's kind of at the very bottom end of that value chain, right?
Yeah.
Who's taking all the risk, right? So the grower is investing in inputs and water and labor, and has very little control over the markets, has very little control over the weather, right? The thing they control the most is really around efficiency and reducing costs. But they can't control like very large factors that are impacting their business. And then the food leaves and they don't really know where it goes. So it's kind of it's really we call it a disadvantageous situation, and it's a hard position for growers to be in.
Yeah.
And when there are costs, when there are impacts to the market, the grower tends to be the kind of final, the person who gets squeezed the most, right? And so Pablo recognized that. He went away, worked for distributors, worked for other companies in the produce space, kind of started seeing this even more vividly. Went and got his MBA from Cornell, who has a great agricultural, great ag program, as well as a great MBA program. And while he was there, he kind of devised this new business plan to help farmers and help growers, specifically in Mexico, that were importing to the U.S. And the first product he created was something we call preseason, which is a form of working capital for growers. So if you think about the grower, we talked about this, right? Growers, they're kind of a high risk value proposition for a typical bank.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so banks are like, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars, and then there's all these variables like weather and market conditions that actually may decrease your likelihood of being able to pay us back. So in any situation like that, your rates are kind of extreme, right? And they give loans that are like hyper collateralized, right? And the one asset that growers have that is of great value in a collateralized environment is their land. Now, the real challenge here is that, first thing, many growers actually don't own their land. Many of them lease, not just in Mexico or Latin America, but across the world, right? So if you don't have that asset to collateralize, you can't get a loan. Mm-hmm. And if you do have that asset, knowing that there are all these risks in the process, are you going to be, growers aren't very comfortable collateralizing the land that they inherited from their grandparents and their grandparents' grandparents and their grandparents' parents, right? The land is all they have. And so Pablo, who is an incredibly brilliant man, mm-hmm. said, okay, look, first thing we can address is providing for growers with working capital. So we need to figure out how to address this risk reward situation that banks can't get past. So how do we provide them working capital without collateralizing their land, if they even have land to collateralize? So he came up with this. He and Ben Desastre, who's our other founder, came up with an incredibly sophisticated financial model to be able to interpret and understand the risk associated with each grower.
Wow.
One of the simple things they did, which is so brilliant, is we actually have a team of field operations folks who actually go down and meet with the growers and spend time with the growers and really get to understand them.
Wow, that's nice.
So they built that trust, mm-hmm. that's one-to-one, that you don't get when you're filling out an application at a bank, right? Yeah. So in addition to doing our due diligence, like any great form of provider of working capital would do, we actually go down and build this relationship with them and help them, if they do have challenges, work through those challenges so that they're ultimately their ability to pay back that working capital to us, but also to help making sure that they're going to actually produce and do all the things they need to do to support their end customers.
Right.
So that business was the start of how we started addressing what we call like this transparency and opaqueness in the system. So working capital, there was an opaqueness to how people get capital. So we've addressed that with that first product, and it's grown like crazy. We've helped facilitate over $4 billion in what we call gross merchandising value, which just means transactions. So $4 billion worth of product going from Mexico and Latin America into the United States as an export, just through that product. And so, and we've built on since then.
Wow. And then you've recently released the marketplace storefront. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Yeah. So our business has evolved, right? So we started with preseason, and as we started continuing to build relationships with growers, we started identifying more and more opportunities to support them. The one of the areas that we're helping them with is in trading, right? Is in helping to matchmake and find growers and buyers. Okay. And because many of these growers, some of them are small and medium size, they really want to like grow their business. And how do they do that? They have to find buyers. So we matchmake in that trading. Okay. And storefronts, which is what we just released last week, which is really exciting, is a new platform on our marketplace, our digital marketplace, that allows for growers to create a virtual store.
Like dating, right?
What's that?
Just like dating.
Well, I'll get to that in a second. Actually, it's exactly like, it's really cool. So so it's a digital storefront to showcase your wares, if you will, showcase your produce, take photos and videos of your produce, list the specs, list pricing, list all the things that buyers need to look for. So when buyers come to the marketplace, they can say, hey, look, I'm looking for Hass avocados with this kind of spec at this price. They can do a search, and then it'll pull up all the growers that do that. Now, here's what gets really interesting, and coming back to the dating analogy. Okay, so if you think historically the way relationships have worked in this space, like when a buyer finds a grower that they trust, they hold on to them, right? When we mean trust is, are they going to deliver on spec, in full, highest quality, right? At the price guaranteed. When they find that, they build a relationship. And some of those relationships go back generations, right? Like we always joke, like the buyer and grower relationships are so strong that like they'll go to each other's quinceañera or their kid's bar mitzvah. Like it's very personal, and it's built on trust, like all great relationships, right? So how do you emulate that level of trust in a virtual digital environment? So if you're a buyer and you're searching for product and a bunch of growers come up that you don't know, how do you know that they're going to deliver on time, in full, on spec, right? Remember how we were talking before about us being on the ground and really knowing the grower?
Yeah.
Okay. When we do these site visits, when we do these regular visits, we have growers that we call verified growers. Okay. Those very growers that we believe are actually capable of delivering on time and in full. Because if they're capable of paying back the working capital that we've provided them, they certainly are capable of delivering as well, right?
Yeah.
And so we now have these verified growers in our network, which buyers can come and work with. And that's very, very powerful. And so on that storefront, you'll see a verified badge on a grower that we trust and that we know will deliver.
That's
so we've
very cool.
We've eliminated that. So imagine if you were, Will, kind of like a dating app that like only allows cool people in. Like
that somebody can go and vet first. That would have been super helpful when I was dating years ago.
Exactly. Or like, you know how like when you're on like a United Airlines flight and there's the advertorial for that service that like matches perfectly. Like it's kind of like that, right? These people, these folks have been vetted, they're trusted, they are in the same kind of quality of business that you would like to partner with, versus kind of like swipe.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's very cool. What is the cost to the producer then?
You mean for the services?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's not necessarily a fixed cost. We provide fees. The way we actually monetize our business is through fees, and they vary, because a lot of times what will happen is a producer will come in and they'll do a preseason deal with us, right? And those are actually variable rates because of the nature of markets.
Right.
So that kind of impacts the cost. But they'll also then say, hey, look, we want to actually do trading with you, or we want to do another service with you. And we can bundle packages to address some of those costs so that we can reduce the cost as much as possible for those producers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things I actually didn't talk about yet, which is another financial product we have called QuickPay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it's really interesting. So remember how we talked about like the farmer's experience? They plant, right? And they then wait 6 months till harvest. And then at the end of harvest, they have some kind of payment terms with the buyer, right? And so they could go 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, and still not see any form of like repayment from the investment they made earlier in the season. And so what we found was, even though we were providing this preseason working capital very early in that process at planting to help them expand or make investments into their properties, whatever was needed, we were finding that there were like moments in season while they were in the middle of harvest and post at payment where they were really cash strapped, right?
Right.
Especially post, because they were like, okay, we've just paid all of our laborers to harvest all of this, and our buyer isn't going to pay us for another 15, 30, 60 days. So we actually provide what we call quick pay, which is just a kind of form. It's a form of factoring. Like that's the easiest way to understand, even though it's not factoring, a form of cash advance in those kind of like low cash flow moments, right?
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And it really protects their business. And what's brilliant about it actually is it actually serves as a form of trade protection.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's really good points, because like, as you said before, there's just constant risk for farmers, right? That with, they put out the money for seed, for inputs, for labor and all of that. And then they've just got to wait to get paid. So this could really change the life and the cash flow of a farm.
Yeah.
Like
And the buyers
entirely.
love it. Yeah. And totally. And the buyers love it too, because the buyers are like, look, if I have a really great grower, I want to make them happy. I want to keep them satisfied. So they can get paid right on delivery, 100% or
That's
90%
amazing.
or 80%, whatever the number is. Then their customers happy too. And then we just collect from the buyer. Right.
Yeah. So how do you mitigate the risk in that with a perishable item?
Again, I mean, it comes to having a relationship and having confidence in the delivery. Right.
That's so cool.
Now, the other thing is that, so there's this other kind of little nuance. It's kind of wonky, but it might be interesting for your listeners, which is the PACA. Do you know what PACA regulations are?
No.
So it's the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act in the U.S. And it was literally created to protect growers. So what would happen was a grower would grow, they'd send it to the buyer who had a contract, and the buyer would say, you didn't meet my quality, right? Or for some reason it wasn't accepted, whatever the reason was. So U.S. government passed this law to protect growers to say, look, if you formed a contract under PACA, you're protected. Okay, now that's all really well intentioned, but imagine if you and by the way, that protection is extended into Mexican growers who are importing into the U.S. as well. Okay. Now, great. Imagine you're a small to mid-sized grower, even a large grower in Mexico, and you send a shipment and the buyer says, they reject it, right? How many of them do you think have the capacity and know-how to navigate the U.S. legal system to
It'd be a nightmare.
And under PACA, right? So what we do is not only do we provide like real trade protection with those dollars, because we say, look, if you deliver and it meets inspection, we're going to pay you. And so they don't have to worry about rejection. We're going to cover them. And then if the buyer rejects it, we will mitigate and mediate for PACA. Now, right?
Right.
So we take on that risk. And by the way, it's for the buyers too, because the buyers might receive something that really isn't up to standard, right? Yeah. So we will also mediate on their behalf and mitigate those risks for them too. So if you think about it, like soup to nuts, right? Like full sweep here, we're providing working capital before planting season, helping them grow and mitigate risk, right? Mm-hmm. And then during season, we can give them cash advances to address any kind of issues growers have. And then post-harvest, we're not only giving them capital to cover whatever costs aren't being covered yet until they're paid, but we're actually paying them on time and providing them trade protection coverage through PACA.
That's amazing.
So what we like to say to our growers is like, risk less, grow more. And it's a simple
I love
framework
that.
It works really well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And last year, the USDA released a report on farm earnings in the US, and it stated that producers are receiving only 14.5 cents from every dollar spent on food. And that's the lowest amount in 3 decades. So how can you guys help put more of that dollar into the producer's pocket?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at this, right? Certainly, like we can all agree that growers are, again, the least advantaged of all of the participants in that food supply chain, right, even though they're the most critical. I think we can all agree. And that's true in Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Peru, United States.
Yeah.
China, it's everywhere. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the elasticity of food prices are such that like asking the end consumer to pay more is a really hard value proposition, right? Like that's we're all seeing the reaction that people are having to, an increase in food costs today. And look, there's lots of people that are struggling, and I think we should need to be conscious of that. So driving costs at the consumer side, on the consumer side, is really hard, except for around premium products and sustainability products. We can see that there's a little more elasticity and premium on those.
Yeah.
But there's a cost to the grower to do that as well. So I think that's really hard. So I think what we can do is our mission is really to provide greater transparency in the food system so that growers, right, can not only manage their business and their costs down, mm-hmm, but also to try to increase their take rates throughout that supply chain, right?
Yeah.
So if we can connect growers to great buyers directly, right, we estimate that there's about a 60% economic waste in the produce supply chain. Okay.
Wow,
and
that's
part of a big part of that, 40% of that mm-hmm, is actually around just plain food waste, right?
Yeah.
Which, again, the grower doesn't have much control over, but there's mm-hmm, so much food waste that happens. And a lot of that food waste happens because the produce goes from many touch points, right? Like it can go from 4 to 9 different touch points between the grower and the end consumer. And so waste happens in that. And then there's a lot of economic fat in that system as well. Right. So if we can do a better job of connecting buyers or distributors and growers or connecting growers to end buyers, then I think we can address this issue. I think that's a big part of it. And then, of course, like giving them the working capital so that they can grow and expand and drive efficiencies at scale on their farms. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of it too, right? So if as they try to scale up, like any great business, more scale, more efficiency, better marginal returns, et cetera, and the ability to diversify their crop base so that they can withstand certain potential negative outcomes that naturally occur. Right. So, that's where we're focused. It's really providing that transparency and giving our growers the tools to make great decisions. We have a pricing insights tool that helps them as well, helps grow buyers as well too. So this opacity, right? This like weird opaqueness that happens in produce, coupled with the fact that it's a highly perishable product, creates all that economic waste. And that's what we really are setting out to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And I've heard that the food travels on average of something like 1,600 miles between the farm and plate. That's really incredible if you think about it, and how much waste is in that.
Exactly.
That's just crazy. Totally crazy.
The other thing that happens with that is like, so there's all that waste.
Yeah.
But then it also ends up affecting the quality of the food.
Yeah.
Right? Like we'll harvest an apple 9 months before it's ever consumed.
Yeah, that's
right. So, I mean, do you think I think we can all like honestly say, even though those apples, I mean, it's amazing how sophisticated this industry really is to be able to harvest 9 months before it's consumed on a perishable product. Like it's kind of mind blowing, actually.
It really is.
But I think we can all agree that if you go out and pick a ripe apple from the tree and eat it, it's going to be a far better and more nutritious experience than an apple that was picked 9 months ago. That's just biology.
That's just
right?
It. Yeah.
And so if we can shorten that gap, not only will we reduce food waste, but we'll just be providing healthier, better tasting experiences for consumers.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. My son last night at dinner said, Mom, why is it that when we go out and pick our dinner from the garden, it tastes better? And that's exactly what it is. And I said, because it's fresh and we grew it with love. That's my answer. Right.
So true. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
There's nothing beats fresh produce, right?
Yeah, for sure. And so what advice do you have for growers as they start out this 2023 growing season?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the advice is like there are tools out there for you.
Mhm.
There are resources that are there for you to help grow your business and reduce risk. And we're one of them. There's several great companies that are out there that are really trying to support growers. Um, and the world where a grower didn't have access to capital or pricing insights or the ability to connect directly with a buyer, those days are gone. There's incredible opportunity for them to accomplish their mission, which is to provide healthy, nutritious, great tasting food for the world.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And then conversely, what about consumers? What words do you have for those who are seeing all of the inflation? They want to help farmers. They want to see more of the dollar spent on the farm and not on marketing and middlemen. What advice do you have to consumers?
I mean, eat more veggies. I'll put on like my
Yeah.
parent hat. Eat more fruits and veggies. Like they're always good for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they are still an incredible high value food source for people,
Yeah.
right? Like if you look at it from a caloric and nutritional perspective, like you can't beat fresh fruit and veggies, right? And so I'd say, a little self-serving here, but eat more of those.
Yeah.
And it'll be good for you and your family. Secondly, I think the industry in general is getting more transparent, and I think we're getting a lot smarter about the types of foods we should be eating,
Mm-hmm.
and look for those labels that do signal healthy growing conditions and for the environment and for people, whether it's USDA organic or fair trade. I think if you want to eat with a conscience, I think that information's out there for you. But either way, eat more fruits and veggies.
Yeah, love it. And I have one last question for you. Why do you personally serve the agriculture industry? What's your greatest passion in all of this?
I mean, it's so funny you say that because we just had this. I was down in Mexico City where my team is, and we were talking about it, and we all went around the table and talked about like what excites us about our jobs, and without fail, every single one of us said we love waking up every day knowing that we're helping growers and farmers. It's so inspiring when you go and you go to the farm and you meet these folks and you see what they do. And it's like, honestly, it's a miracle when you watch like a barren tree in winter fruit in spring. And to see the love, as you said, and the care that goes into that, into the science that goes into it. These are, I mean, we call them heroes. We think growers are heroes, and we honestly, genuinely mean that. Like what they do every year is a miracle. They birth life through their produce, and it's they're really heroic, and they're members of the community. And so, like, we wake up every day inspired by them and wanting to make their lives better.
Right. Oh, that's awesome. And so where can people find you?
We're at ProducePay.com.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Awesome.
you can come to our website, and then if you want to get into the marketplace, there's a link from our marketing website right to the marketplace, and you can register. And we'd love to have U.S. growers too. We're expanding now to include U.S. growers on our platform, and they're seeing great value there as well. So we're this year we're going to be global. In Europe, we're looking at Africa. So there's a limitless amount of opportunity for us to support growers.
Awesome. What about Canada too? Are you open to Canada yet?
Canada as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
all
great.
of North America. Thank you for reminding me.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Great conversation, and love your passion about this.
Thanks, Chrissy. Really appreciate it. Love your show.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want to learn more, the links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, Telegram, or AgFuse channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day. Our newest podcast by North American Ag is called What Color is Your Tractor? The stories behind the ag brands you love and the ag brands you love to hate. Hosted by me, Chrissy Wozniak. We take a deep dive into the companies that have built modern agriculture. Subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Go to whatcolorisyourtractor.com. Available on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.